In today's video, we're going to recreate these VOX infographics. We have some stylized minimal animation, as well as some container infographics, and then their famous map animation. And we're going to be covering all of this in just one video. The great thing is, doing each one of these infographics will teach you how VOX goes about their visuals and their animation so that you can take this into your future projects. Now, if you want to learn how to do more VOX style, Iman Ghazi style, Ali Abdal, Dan Coe, or even my style that has gotten me millions of views, then make sure to join our exclusive Leverage Editor program and community waitlist. Our exclusive program and community will help you from being an okay average editor that's struggling to land clients and also getting underpaid to an advanced level editor and animator who's able to work with the top level influencers and brands while getting paid top dollar. The enrollment starts March 1st and the program and community will only be available for 5 days. We want to keep things very exclusive so that we can help each individual out. And so far, tons of students are finding success. So sign up on the waitlist to become a leverage editor as the spots are going to be extremely limited. With that, let's get into the video. Alrighty, so we're here in After Effects, and the first thing that you should have is just a new composition setup, and you can copy these settings right here. Go ahead and pause that and copy it, and I'm just going to hit OK. Now, the first thing that we are going to do is that infographic with all of the little people icons, I guess you could call them. So let's build that out. One thing I like to do is always start with the background, of course. So we're going to right click right here to new and then do new solid. We're going to change the color of this to a greenish gray. You could type this color code in if you're following along and then hit OK. By the way, I forgot to say the project file for this will be available as I'll be using a ton of different assets that you might not be able to find online. So if you want to download it for free, check the link in the description. It's available for you and you can follow along as well. And you're going to get the whole entire project file as well. So that means you'll get the whole project file that I've built out here, the completed videos and all that. So download that if you want to follow along. All right, so we got that background going. Now we need to build out that green icon. So what I'm going to do here is go over to the shape tools in the top left, change this to ellipse tool, and then click and drag while holding shift. Make sure you're holding shift as it's going to create a perfect circle for us. We can scale it up to about, that size right here. We want to change the stroke on this to a white stroke. We might have to mess with the stroke size later, but I'm going to just keep it at 5 for now. And then the fill, we're going to have to change it to a green. So this is the green color code that you want to use. Just copy this and then hit OK. Going to see where we're at with the stroke width. Something like 6 for now is good. We might have to change that later. So now we got the base set up. What I'm going to do real quick is just align it in the middle. One thing I have to do is change the anchor point to the middle of the circle here. 2 ways to do it. You can hit Y on your keyboard, drag this to the middle and kind of guess if it's actually in the center or not. Or if you have Motion Tools, which is a free plugin, definitely recommend downloading it. This allows you to align anchor points right away if you click this thing in the middle. So definitely recommend downloading this. If you don't have it, of course, you can just do it manually if you, for some reason, don't want to download it. But okay, there we go. We got that all set. We're going to put this in the middle by going to align. I'm going to do align vertically and align horizontally. That'll put it perfectly in the middle. One thing we need to do is have a green outer ring to that. Simple way is just going back up to your ellipse tool, drawing a quick circle here and getting rid of the stroke. Kind of put this behind. So we want to take this layer and drag it beneath and then make sure this is all in the middle too. So align that anchor point, go over to the line settings, do line horizontally and line vertically. And that should be in the middle. You could scale it up if you want. I'm just going to scale it up a tad bit to like 102, wrong circle. So we want to scale this one up to 102. I think that looks pretty good. Last thing to do to complete this icon that we're building out is the person icon that needs to be placed inside of it. So I have an icon here that I've built out. Once again, you can download this for free. The link is in the description along with all the other assets that we're going to use in this project. But if you want to go out and find this yourself, you certainly can. Just look up person icon on Google. So I dragged that in there. We're going to scale that down and place them in the center. Right about that size is pretty good. We're going to align it horizontally and then align it vertically. I'm actually going to move them up a bit, but while holding shift. It's pretty good. All right, so what we can do from here is just compose all of these layers together. So I'm highlighting all of them, right-clicking, and go to pre-compose. We can just call this person icon. Hit OK. All right, so we got to make a bunch of these icons, and we also have to place them in the correct area. So what I'm going to do first is create a new layer. Go to solid. Doesn't matter what color it is, just hit OK. In the effects and presets window, I'm going to look up grid. Under generate, you'll see grid. Just throw that onto that solid layer that you just made. That's going to show a grid outline for us. This is going to allow us mouse to really line things up correctly and make sure that everything's just all nice and squared. There's a couple of settings though that we need to change in the grid effect here to get the desired amount of icons we want in the right area. So for the anchor, we're going to change this second number here to 574. And then for the corner, we're going to change both these numbers. But for the first one here, we're going to do 1040. And then the second number here should be 657. And then we'll get something that looks like this. From here, what I'm going to do is scale down this icon so it fits within one of these squares. Okay, and then we just need to place this at the right spot. So for this icon, we want to place it 3 down and then 8 over. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right there would be good. I'm just going to scale it down a little bit more so it fits in there comfortably. Make sure it's in the middle of it. All right, so now that we have this icon in the right box, what we're going to do is animate it out first before we start to duplicate it, as this will make things a whole lot easier when we then duplicate it, because we'll also duplicate the animation. So to do this, what we need to do is bring up all the transform settings here. We're going to make a keyframe for position and opacity. Make sure your playhead's at the beginning when you do that. Then you can drag both these keyframes out to the right a little bit, and then we're just going to drag the position down here. Something like right here should be fine. Gonna make the opacity 0, and then I'm gonna drag my playhead a little bit more to the right and then also make the opacity 0. I don't really want it to start to come into like, yeah, right about here. We can mess with the opacity. I'm just gonna drag these keyframes closer. Obviously it's a little slow, so I'm gonna drag this to the left and drag the other ones to the left. And I'm gonna highlight these 2 keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, go over to the graph editor, click on this on the right, and then drag that to the left. Looks pretty good. Now we can actually get into duplicating. The thing is, if we duplicate it and then drag this, it's going to mess with the keyframes of it. So what we need to do is pre-compose it before we duplicate it. Otherwise, if we drag it, the position keyframes are going to get messed up. So right click, do pre-compose, and then this is really important. Make sure that move all attributes into the new composition is selected. If you don't do this, you're going to have trouble with keyframing later on. So hit OK. Now we can duplicate it by hitting Command D, clicking and dragging it while holding Shift and bringing it to the right. Holding Shift will keep it on its horizontal plane, and we just want to put it in the middle of that next square, and then we're going to do 10 icons here. So Command D, click while holding Shift and dragging it, placing it in the next box. So I'm going to speed this part up, then I'm going to talk about how we can duplicate even more and make it faster. All right, so now that we have 10 here, what we want to do before we start to duplicate more is stagger the animation. Really quick way to do this is highlighting all of the icons here, going over to Motion Tools Layout. Once again, you should download this. It's completely free. And what we're going to do here is go over to the mount, change this to 10. Then we could click on this icon right here, and it's going to take these layers and separate them by 10 frames. So if we watch it back, they all come in. I may want to do like 15 frames here. So I'm going to Command Z that, change this to 15, and then hit this icon, and it'll be by 15 frames. That looks really good. Now what we can do from here is pre-compose this one more time. So I'm going to right click, pre-compose it, and we could just call this line icon animation. Hit OK. Then we can duplicate it by hitting Command D, clicking and dragging while holding Shift and placing it below, just like that. We're going to duplicate it a couple more times until we make a box. So we want to do 10 by 10. Okay, I lied to you. We actually want to only do 9 rows here, not 10. So 10 to the right, 9 going down. From here, we need to stagger each line as they animate in, because right now everything is kind of all synced up. So it's really simple. Again, we just need to highlight all these layers, and then I'm going to keep the amount to 15. We'll see if that's enough. I'm just going to hit this icon right here. I do think it could actually be sped up. So I'm going to Command Z this and change this to, let's try 5 and see how that looks. Stagger it. By the way, if you don't have motion tools, you can do this manually. It just might take you a little bit just by staggering them. You could stagger it manually by just clicking and dragging it and moving it by 5 frames or whatever. All right, so I think that's pretty good. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is make a rectangle around this. Go up to the shape tools here and go to rounded rectangle tool. We're just going to click and drag. Make sure you don't have any layers selected so that when you click and drag, a new layer is being formed or a new shape's being formed, and we want to make it a nice rectangle around it. If yours doesn't look like this, you might just need to cancel out the fill and then change the stroke to the exact same green that we have here. I'm also going to change the width of the stroke a little bit down to 3. I think that'll look a little bit better. From here, let's just take off the grid layer here so we can see what we're working with. And we need this rectangle or this box to animate as well. The lines need to animate coming in. This is pretty simple. All you have to do is first off, just bring your playhead to the beginning of the timeline. In this shape tool, you'll see where the contents are, like just drop down like this, and you'll see this little thing where it says add. You can click on this right here. We want to do add trimmed paths. Once you put that in there, you'll see trim paths, drop that down, and you'll see start and end. So we just want to manipulate the start and see like how it's controlling here, and then the end. So yeah, we want to start off with the end. So we're going to put the end at 0, make a keyframe for that, drag our playhead out to the right, and then put it at 100%. I'm going to drag this keyframe out a little bit, highlight both these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, go over to the graph editor, change this to the left here, and we'll see how that looks. Okay, a little too fast, so I'm going to drag this out a lot more. Not so bad. And I'm just going to take this layer and move it to the right. So we want it coming in probably right around here. That looks good. Just like that. And then we're going to add some text here. So go up to your text tool here, click on it, and then click once here. And you just want to type this in here. So the font I'm using is Heading Now Trial. So you'll be able to download this for free in the link in the description, along with this whole entire project file and any other assets that we use. Or you can just look it up online if you want to. I believe it's free. So we got the text here. It's already set. All the colors are already set correctly here. So we got fill should be this grayish color. You can copy it. And then I'm just going to hit OK. And then we want to align it right. So go over to the line tool, do align horizontally, and that'll put it in the right area for us. Right there is pretty good. Then we need to do another text here, and that's 2019. Just type that. So this font doesn't allow numbers. We're just going to change this to Europa. That will also be available for you to download. And we want to place this in the middle as well. So align horizontally. All right, so almost there. We just need to now animate the text. So to do that, I'm not going to do anything too crazy here. It might seem bad in the beginning until we move on to putting the actual finishing touches on this animation. So bear with me here. It will look fine once it's complete. So what we want to do is make sure our National Bureau of Economic Research text is selected here in the timeline. Then go up to the pen tool, and we're just going to create a mask around this. So once that mask is created, hit M on your keyboard. That'll allow us to bring up the mask settings. We want to change this from add to subtract. That'll bring it out. And then we want to do mask path. So make sure your playhead is at the beginning. Create a keyframe for mask path. Hit V on your keyboard just to bring up your regular cursor. Drag your playhead out to the right a little bit. And then what we can do is just drag this all the way to the right. We don't even have to do any easing. That's good as is. And we want to do the exact same thing for 2019. So bring your playhead to the beginning. Go over to the pen tool, and we're just going to create a little box around it. Hit M on your keyboard once that box is completed. Go over to add and just change that to subtract. Create a keyframe for mask path. Hit V on your keyboard. Drag your playhead out to the right, and then move that to the right and see how that looks. That might be a little slow, so let's bring this keyframe to the left. This looks pretty good. So now that we have the animation of it correct, we just want to come in at the right time. So I'm going to drag this to the right, figure out when I want it coming in. So I think like right around here would be good. Want to do the same for 2019. Just figure out the timing of it. That's pretty good. All right, so the animation is almost complete. We just need to add the finishing touches to it. And this is something that VOX always does on every single one of their animations. This is how they get that really like jittery, almost drop frame look feel to it. And that's because they actually drop the frames of their animations. And it's really simple to do this. So right click over here in the timeline, go to new, and we want to do new adjustment layer. On this adjustment layer, we're going to look up posterized time and just toss this onto that adjustment layer that we just made. And we want to change it to 14. So right off the bat, it's just going to give everything that jittery look. It will slow down your computer. So I always add stuff like this at the end, like right before I export, just because it's computer intensive, but it really adds that, I don't know, that VOX feeling to it. Couple things that we're also going to do here is add some grain in a vignette, and this will also translate to the other animations that we're going to be making in this tutorial. To do that, just right click again, go to new adjustment layer. On this, we're going to throw a grain effect. So type in grain and you'll see add grain. Just add that to the adjustment layer, and then we're going to just change the viewing mode to final output. Go over to color and change that to monochromatic. It might be hard on your end to see the actual grain here, but it's there. Once you do it in After Effects, you'll be able to see it. Last thing that we're going to toss onto it is another adjustment layer, and we're going to look up vignette. Throw on CC vignette onto that adjustment layer that we just made. And at the moment, I don't think we need to adjust the vignette. You can if you want, but it looks pretty good as is. I might just up the intensity of the grain here a little bit. And that looks really good. That's our first infographic animation that we made. You certainly can use something like this in the future when you're trying to display a lot of icons or something. It's definitely a great reference point to go back to. And the thing with VOX is just nailing down the style first, like the colors, the background, like how the icons are supposed to look. And the animation is almost like a secondary thing. So it's all about style with VOX. With that, we're going to move on to the next infographic here. So to do that, we're just going to do right click, new composition. I'm just going to call this one info container. Call it whatever you like. Copy these settings here and then just hit OK. So as you know, I always like to start off with the background. What we're going to do is right click, go to new solid. And then the color that we want to use here is a gray. So like I was saying before, with VOX, it's all about selecting the right colors and the right shades of colors. That's really important as everything is just based off of design here and the animation is a secondary thing. So we want to use this color here and then just hit OK. So it should be this like dark gray. And then we want to start building out these containers. So to do that, go over to your shape tools. We're going to click on this rounded rectangle tool. So make sure it's rounded rectangle and click and hold shift and it's going to make a perfect square for us as you hold shift. So something around, let's see, around that size should be good. From here, I'm going to change the stroke to white and then change the width of it to 2. For the fill, we actually want to do a gradient. And to do that, all you have to do is click on the fill text here, change this to gradient. It's going to look like this and we're going to have to change it. So hit OK and then go to the actual color selector and it'll bring up this little window here. So for this color on the left, we want it to be a blue. So I'm going to take this color code here. You can type this in if you're following along. Make it that blue. Then we want to click over here in the middle to make a color stamp in the middle. And we're just going to change this to, we want it to be a little bit of that blue, but a little bit more towards the white side. So right around here, you can copy this color code if you're following along. And then this here on the right, we're going to click on that and just change it to that color blue that we're using. So it'll look like this. It's not perfect. We need to adjust the actual gradient itself. First off, put this in the middle and then make sure that these diamonds here are even, but it still doesn't look that good. So this is really important. Once you hit OK, you're going to hit V on your keyboard. Don't do anything else but hit V. Once you hit V, you'll see this little, I don't know what to call this, but this will pop up and now you can drag these little anchor points here. I guess we could call them. You could drag them to the right area. So we want it to look a little bit like that. Actually, like move this up. It seems like that the white area is a little bit more towards the upper corner of it, like that. That looks pretty good. And that's our gradient right there. Now the next thing to move on to is actually putting the icons and text in there. But before we do that, we want to align this in the middle. So go back to motion tools and hit the center anchor point. Once again, if you don't have motion tools, which you should get, all you can do is just hit Y on your keyboard and it'll allow you to adjust this anchor point, and you'd want to try to put it in the center as best as you can. But I'm just going to use motion tools and click the center button there. From here, we could go to our align window, do align horizontally, align vertically. This will put it perfectly in the middle for us so that when we duplicate things, it's going to make it a little bit easier. Now we need to place the icon and text in here, and then we're going to duplicate it later to create the other containers on the side. So the first one is a cloud icon where it says atmospheric river with 43 degrees. So we're going to have a icon here. Once again, you'll be able to get that icon here. You'll be able to download it for free. The link is in the description, along with all the other assets and everything that we use in this project file. Or you can find it online if you just look up cloud icon. But I'm just going to drag this and toss it in there. We can scale it down a bit. Make sure you hit V on your keyboard to bring up your regular cursor if you're messing with the anchor point. But we're just going to put this right about here is good. Maybe scale it down a little bit more and then bring it up. Okay, so we got that icon placed there, but it still doesn't look right. There's some things that we need to add to it. So what we want to do is add a gradient on top. So go over the effect and presets, look up gradient. We're going to do a gradient ramp and just toss that onto our cloud icon. Go over to the start color, which is the black. And we're going to change it to this blue right here and then hit OK. Copy this if you're following along. And then for the end color, we're going to change it to this color code here, like a little darker blue. Copy that if you're following along and then hit OK. Then change the blend to original to 33%. That's looking pretty good. Last thing to do is throw a shadow on it. So go over to shadow. You'll see drop shadow. Drag that onto the cloud and we can manipulate this a little bit better. So I'm going to turn up the opacity and distance a little bit and turn up the softness a tad bit. Just kind of mess around with the settings here to get what we want. That looks really good. So you can copy these settings if you're following along. Maybe turn that softness down a little bit. There we go. That looks good. Now we need to get that text in there. So we're going to go up to our text tool, click on that, and then click once here. And we're just going to type out 43. We can scale this up, drag it over to our container here. If it's behind it, just make sure this layer is on top. So we want to change the font here to SQL Sans. And then we want to do light body here. Another thing that we can do to the text is go over to this little VA thing. It will just change the distance between the 4 and 3. Right around there looks good. I'm going to scale this up a little bit more. I also want to align it in the middle here. Then hit T on your keyboard and we're just going to turn down the opacity of it. Right around 78% should be good. Now I'm just going to use the exact same font and type in atmospheric river. Obviously this needs to scale down quite a bit, so we're gonna scale it down and then make sure it fits right over here. We could go to the line settings, align that vertically or horizontally actually, sorry. And last thing to do with this is hit T on the keyboard, change this to 78%. I'm just gonna adjust this a little bit more, just scale it down. It's a little too big, I think, and then we'll realign it. That's good. We're gonna go over to the tools here and go to your ellipse tool. Make sure nothing's selected in your timeline and then click and drag while holding shift. It's gonna make a circle. We obviously want to get rid of the fill, change the color to the exact color here, hit OK, and bring this up a bit. Right around 5 pixels looks good. I'm going to place the anchor point in the middle and then scale this down. So S on the keyboard, scale it down, place it right about there. And there we go. There we have it. It looks pretty good. Maybe just change this to like 7 or 6. Yeah, 6 looks a lot better. That's it. Now we need to duplicate it and create the other containers. So instead of pre-composing everything, let's just take all the layers here, except the background, hit Command D. That's going to duplicate it. Then I'm going to drag everything to the top. While everything's still selected, I'm going to click and drag this while holding shift and bring it to the left. All right, now that's to the left. All we need to do is just change the font and the icon here. Let's delete this cloud icon. Then I'm going to drag this cyclone icon that I have here onto the project here. Once again, you can download this for free or find it online. But if you download for free, you'll get the project file as well and all the other assets used. All right, so with this cyclone here, we want to just make sure it's the right size. Something like that for now looks good. And then go over to the first cloud that we worked with, go to the effects and controls, and we're going to copy this gradient ramp and drop shadow. So I just clicked the gradient ramp, held shift on my keyboard and clicked the drop shadow, and now I'm going to hit Command C to copy and then go over to our cyclone layer and hit Command V. That's just going to copy and paste those effects that we placed on it. Obviously we need to change the cyclone colors here. So for that, we want to do the end color. So we want to do this little pink here, copy this color code, hit OK. For the star color, we want it more of this orangey yellow and then hit OK. I'm going to just do blend with original, bring that down to 0%. And then what we can do is add another effect on it to give it more of a 3D kind of feel. So we have shadow looked up. That's all you need to look up and you'll see shadow/highlight. Drag and drop that onto the cyclone. Don't change any of the settings as it looks pretty good as is right now. Next is just to change the numbers here. So we're going to do 63 and change this to tropical cyclone. Should be good to go. It's pretty good. All right, so we're going to do the exact same thing where we duplicated all these layers. So I'm just going to want to duplicate the middle one, highlight all those layers here, make sure we're not highlighting anything else. Hit Command D, then we could just drag this all the way to the top. Hit V on your keyboard, click and drag this while holding shift and try to get the same exact distance here. That's good. And then we want to delete that cloud icon. And then we have this hot icon that you can download in the link in the description, or you can just find it online. Drag that on there. We're going to scale it down, rotate it. I'll hit an R on the keyboard. It's going to allow us to rotate this like that. I want to get rid of this bottom half here. So we're going to go up to the pen tool, make sure that the layer is selected. And we're just going to create a mask around this bottom half here. Okay, you'll see that the bottom half actually stays. So you want to go into the mask settings here and just change this to subtract. That looks good. Just kind of put this in the right position, angle it right if you need to. Just going to rotate a little bit more. And then we can copy and paste the cyclone's effects on it. So I'm going to go to gradient ramp, copy this, hold down shift, copy drop shadow, and hold down shift and click on shadow/highlight. Hit Command C on my keyboard to copy all of them, and then go over to the hot icon and hit Command V. I'm just going to do blend with original. Just turn that up a tad bit. Nothing too crazy here. Then we could change these colors to more of an orange. So I'm doing the end color. Do this more of like a dark orange here. And then the star color, we want it to make it a yellow. I'm going to mess with the blend fine with original settings. 18% should be good. And I think it looks a little like too prominent. So I'm going to hit T on my keyboard and just turn down the opacity on it a little bit. One thing I forgot to do is just change the texture. So we're going to do 103. This thing needs to also move to the right and change this to extreme heat. Now that's done, we need to get into animating it. So to do that, we want to actually move these containers back into the middle. So I'm going to highlight all the layers that are involved with the one on the left and then just click and drag it while holding shift to bring it perfectly in the middle. Once that's in the middle, I'm going to right click and then pre-compose. We could call this heat and hit OK. Now that's created. We want to do the same exact thing for the tropical cyclone. So find all the layers that are involved with that. Make sure they're all highlighted, click and drag while holding shift, bring that to the middle, right click, pre-compose, and then just call this cyclone. Hit OK. The last thing to do is just pre-compose all the rest of the layers except the background because this is our cloud icon or cloud container here. So pre-compose that and we'll just call it cloud. Now that all these containers have been pre-composed, I'm just going to unhighlight 2 of them and just work with this cloud container here. We're going to apply a 3D effect to it and also animate it, and then we can copy and paste that over to the other containers once we're finished. So the effect that we're going to apply to this to make it 3D is called shatter. So in the effects and presets, look up shatter. We're just going to drag this onto our cloud container. As soon as you drag it on, it's obviously going to look pretty weird. So there's a lot of settings here that we need to change. So follow along and it should look exactly like what I'm going to do here. So we're going to change the view drop down here to render. Then under shape where it says pattern and bricks, we're going to change this to custom. It will disappear and then change the custom shatter map from none to right now we're working with the cloud. So change it to cloud. From here, what we can do is do the drop down for camera position and go over to the Y rotation. We could just turn it on its side to see what we're working with a little bit. Then go over to textures, drop that down. We want to change this color to the color blue here on the right. We want to then change this front layer here to color. That will almost get the color that we want. So the last thing to do is go over to lighting. And once you're in lighting, we just want to change this to first comp light and then increase this to 1 and it'll look just like this. We can change the extrusion depth to what you want. So for me, I'm just going to do like 36 here. It's pretty good, or 34. All right. So to actually animate this out now, we want to go over to our camera and position here. We can just drop everything else down and go over to the Y rotation, create a keyframe for that. And then I'm also going to move it a little bit, something like that. Then drag my playhead out to the right, make this 0. So if we play that back, it should look like this. Definitely want to smooth this out. So I'm going to highlight both these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. And then we go over the graph editor, click this on the right and drag that to the left. Should be good. So it looks good. Next is just to do the position of it. So I'm going to hit P on my keyboard, create a keyframe for position, drag that to the right, and then kind of just drag it like here on frame. Highlight both these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. And you guessed that we're going to go over the graph editor, click and drag this to the left, and it should look pretty good. If you want, you can make it feel a little bit more 3D just by messing with the Y rotation. I'm also going to add a little bit more depth to it. So under shape, we can bring this up. I think 50.50 will look good. And there you have it. So now we can apply this effect onto the other containers here. And once you do this, you'll realize there's just one setting that you need to change to make it right. So we're going to copy this shatter here, Command C it, and highlight both these layers, hit Command V. Also, we can make them visible as well. So it's turning here and we need to copy the position keyframes as well. So hit P on your keyboard and you'll see the keyframes. Highlight both of them, do Command C to copy, go over to your cyclone and heat layer and hit Command V. So this will copy the exact same motion of it. What we can do to make these off to the side is just pre-compose it one more time. So I'm going to pre-compose the cyclone layer here. Make sure that this is checked off. Move all attributes to new composition, hit OK. Pre-compose the heat as well, hit OK. And then I'm just going to drag my playhead to the right, move this while holding shift, go over to the cyclone one, find a good spacing between them, then we could watch it back. So that looks pretty good. So I want to stagger these coming in a little bit. So I'm going to drag cyclone and to the bottom here. So it's like cyclone, cloud, then heat, because that's how I want them to come in. So for the cyclone, I'm just going to go into it and hit P on the keyboard. I'm just going to make this quicker. So a little bit quicker, that's all we want. We could also make the turning of it quicker, okay? Then we go back and we'll see that the cyclone comes up first, then the cloud, and then we also want to go back into the heat, hit P on the keyboard. We want this to be longer, drag the rotation of it. So if we go back to our containers here, and that's it for the animation. What we need to do now is just add the finishing touches to it. And if you remembered from what we created before that first animation, all we have to do is just copy these adjustment layers. So I'm going to highlight all of them, Command C, and go over to our our composition here and hit Command V. For the one adjustment layer, the grain is way too much. So I'm going to just turn this down to actually 0.5 and see how that looks. All right, this is looking pretty good. I almost forgot. There's actually one more thing we want to do as far as the animation with the containers here. And that's actually adding a wiggle expression so that they're just moving ever so slightly and they're not completely still like when they reach their final point. So for the cyclone, just hit P on your keyboard. You'll see position. I'm going to hold down Option on Mac, and it might be something different on PC, but once you go over to the position keyframe and hold down Option and click it, an expression window will pop up. We're just going to do a really simple expression. We're going to type in wiggle. Then once you see wiggle here, you can click that or hit tab. That'll set the wiggle expression in there. And then we just need to change this to 2 by, I believe, 14. Actually, it might be 1 by 14. I think it's 1 by 14. And then we'll watch it back. When you watch it back, you can unhighlight the adjustment layers so your computer's not like running into problems. So yeah, it's 1 by 14. And it just adds a little bit of wiggle to it, which I think looks pretty good. So what we can do is the same exact thing for the rest of the layers. But for the cloud one, we actually have to pre-compose it one more time. Make sure that this is checked off. Hit P on the keyboard, hold down Option, create a keyframe, which will bring up the expressions. We want to do wiggle here, 1 by 14. So 1 comma 14, that should be good. Same exact thing for the heat one. We're going to hit P on our keyboard, hold down Option while hitting the keyframe, type in wiggle 1 by 14, and you should be good. And then just highlight the adjustment layers or make them visible again. And there we have it. Here's our final animation. Looks pretty good. And now we're going to move on to the last animation, which is the map animation. It's pretty easy. So we're going to create a new composition. So right click, new composition, copy these settings here. We'll just call it map, hit OK. And the map thing might seem complicated, and it's really not. There's actually just a few key elements to make it look how it does, how VOX does it. So obviously the first thing that we need to start off with is a really high quality image of a map. So if you don't have a high quality image of a map, it's actually going to ruin the effect. So you can look for one on Google. I found one that I thought looks pretty good, and it's of Silicon Valley. It's a place where all these like tech startups are here in the US, and we're just going to drag that onto our composition. We can just find the right area for it. You can scale it down if you want, because we're going to have it zoom in. And once again, this will be available for you to download this map asset along with all the other assets that we're using. Just check out the link in the description and you'll be able to download everything, including the project file. All right, so once we have this map layer dragged into our composition, we're going to change it to a 3D layer. So we're actually going to animate it first before we put on all the other icons and make it look how it looks. So we're going to animate it, make sure it's 3D, then go over to the drop down settings and we're going to drop down transform. We see everything here. What we can do is just do position and opacity, like create all those keyframes here just in case we're gonna manipulate it in the future. But so once those keyframes are here, let's just mess with the scaling of it. So I want to have it scaled out in the beginning, and yeah, make sure your playhead's at the beginning too. And then from here, I'm going to drag my playhead to the right. We're going to scale it in quite a bit, move it a little bit, and then with the Y rotation, or I'm sorry, the X rotation, we're going to put it into the negative. So it kind of like looks a little flat here. I'm also going to have this scale come in a little bit more. Since there's a really high quality map image here, we can scale it in quite a bit. And I'm going to mess with the X rotation even more. Like, I think right there is pretty good. So right around -54 looks good. And if we play this back, it's going to look a little cheesy. That's all right. What we need to do is just highlight these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. So if you have that easy ease to it, that's fine. One thing that I'm going to use here is called, let's see, extensions flow. If you have this extension here, you can put it up top. I have this little thing called sauce. I actually got this from Paul. Shout out to him. This extension costs a little bit of money. I highly recommend it. It allows you to manipulate the keyframes pretty easily and get the kind of style that you want or the ramping that you want. So make yours look like this. It's just adjusting this graph, hit apply, and it's just gonna make it a whole lot nicer here. We can drag this out quite a bit. And to show you what this looks like on the graph editor, it's just creating this. So if you can mimic this ramping effect to it, you'll be good. So once we have this set, it's time to create a null layer. So right click over here, go to new, and then do null object. We want to parent this to the map. So when we add the icons, we're going to parent the icons to the null, which will give it that 3D effect that we want. So for this first icon, I have the Apple Park. I just made this in Photoshop, or actually I just found the image on Google, but cut it out in Photoshop. You can do that yourself if you want to, but once again, this will be available for free for you to download. So I'm gonna hit S on my keyboard, scale this down quite a bit, and I wanna have this a little bit of a pop-up effect. So I'm gonna bring my playhead to the beginning here, do scale, create a keyframe for that, drag that out to the right, and then make this 0, and then highlight both these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, go over the graph editor, and bring that to the left. So that just kind of pops up. Of course, It's not looking good. What we need to do is I'm going to drag my null to the top. We need to parent this to the null. So just take this pick whip, bring it to that null. And you'll see it just kind of sticks there with the map, which is good. One thing to do though is change it to a 3D layer. Yeah, probably should have messed with the scale settings later on because now we're going to have to change like the size of it here. So I'm going to scale this down and we can move this over here. And I want it to come in right about like here towards the end. So one thing I'm noticing here is that it starts to like get into the rotation of the map. So we want to change one view to 2 views. Make sure it's 3D. I think that was a problem we're having. And then now that we're in 2 views, if yours doesn't look like this, click on the scene and you'll see that you can change it from like active camera to right. So if once it's on right, it should look like this. If it still doesn't, make sure it's in classic 3D. From here, we can just drag this up. So it's kind of like hovering over the map just a tad bit, and then it should match it pretty well. I do want to drag it a little bit forward in the frame, and this will be important later on. Next is to add that Apple icon or Apple logo to it. So I'm just going to drag this into our frame here, scale it down quite a bit. We're going to make it a 3D layer, parent that to the null. So pick whip this over to the null. And we want to make sure it's in the right area in 3D space. So I'm going to hit V on my keyboard to bring up a regular cursor, go over to the blue arrow here and drag that. We could drag it up so it's above the campus here, or the building, the Apple building. And then I'm just going to drag it also to the right here. Drag this layer here to the right as well. And then we're going to hit S on our keyboard to bring up scale. Make sure it's aligned with the other one. And then hit a keyframe for scale, bring that to the right, make it 0. And then we just need to highlight both these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, go over to the graph editor and then bring that to the left. So it's popping in way too quick. Just drag this out to the right. I'm going to have it pop in a little bit later, and that looks pretty good. From here, what we want to do is bring in the other logo. So I have Google, just going to drop that in here. We're going to create something pretty simple for the Google logo and the other logo that we're going to use. So right about here, I want to appear in. So I'm going to drag my layer here. We're going to scale this down quite a bit. Also make it a 3D layer, bring that under the null and then pick whip it to the null. And you see that it's kind of like in the middle of the map here. I actually want it coming in right about here. I think we want to have this come in a little bit earlier actually. And then Google comes in right here. It's in the middle of the map, which is fine. Let's scale it down quite a bit. And I'm going to take this, like first off, drag my playhead to the beginning here. And then I'm going to take the Y axis on our left, or actually our right view here, and bring it so it's like out of frame. You see like it will come in frame and then out of frame, like come through the camera. That's cool. So what we want to do is take the position of it. So P, keyframe that, make sure our playhead's at the beginning of it, drag to the right, and then take the Y here and just increase it. I'm going to scale it up a bit too. Then we can mess with the positioning of it as well. So Google pops up. We want to take the position of it, those keyframes. And so hit P on your keyboard, highlight those keyframes, keyframe assistant, easy ease. So we want to have this easy ease to it. And then go over to the graph editor and move that to the left. I'm going to do the same exact thing for the Meta logo. So drag this on here. We're going to scale it down quite a bit. And then we want to drag this below the null, make it a 3D layer, pick whip it to the null. You can see it's like out of the frame of the map. So first off, let's drag this. Let's have it come in after the Google logo. So right about like here, you can have it come in actually maybe a little bit more. And then what we need to do is just keyframe the positioning of it. So hit P on the keyboard, create a keyframe for position, drag the playhead to the right, and then move the Y axis in frame here. I'm actually going to move it forward a little bit on frame. So we need to actually go back. This is important. So we want to find the area where it needs to be in the beginning. So drag that Y up and then drag it forward in the Z axis and drag the Y down to right where it's like above it. Just kind of manipulate it so it's like that. We want to find the right area for it. Further actually look better. What we can do is scale it down. So once we have it in the right position, from here, what we need to do is just hit P on our keyboard to bring up the position keyframes again, and then create a keyframe for position, drag that to the right, and then make sure your playhead's still there in the beginning. Take the Y of it and then just drag it down. So it like comes out of frame. Now, if we play that back, it should look like this. That looks pretty good. So we're going to highlight these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, go to the graph, and then just drag that to the left. One thing I'm going to do is just bring it back to the first view. And I think the rotation of the map can actually be a little bit more. I'm going to hit rotation on my keyboard, or I'm going to hit R on my keyboard, excuse me. Go over to this keyframe. So I'm going to click this little thing here. It's going to snap the playhead right to our rotation keyframe and just make it a little bit more. I think something like that is good. I'm going to P on the keyboard and I'm just going to change the position of it to the right as well. So make sure your playhead's at that keyframe. If it's not, it's just going to screw things up. I'm actually going to take these and drag it out to the right a little bit. So now it's all about adding the sauce that really makes it feel like a VOX style animation when they do their map style animations. It's a couple effects that they add, or actually really one effect, but I'm adding my own effects to it at the end. And that is this 3D camera effect that gives it a depth of field to it. So what we want to do is create a camera. So right click, go to new and do new new camera. Copy these settings here, particularly the focal distance or the focus distance and the aperture settings. Copy all of these settings here. Make sure it's exactly like mine, and then we're going to hit OK. You'll notice right off the bat, we have this depth of field effect to it. That's what we want. So if it doesn't look like this, we're going to drop down the settings here in camera, go to camera options, and we want to change this focal distance. Yours might be like pretty high. You can change this, bring it down. So we want to go over to the two views here, and you can see this focal distance. We want to make sure it's like on the Apple, like see this little line here. We want to make sure it's on the Apple one. You can have it on the Meta if you want, but I'm going to put it on the Apple one. And then the aperture, you want to change this, like bring that up quite a bit, and then adjust to make sure it's on Apple. And we want to keyframe it too. So bring this back to where it was on Apple. So create a keyframe right here. So we want to do the focal distance, create a keyframe, and then drag your playhead back to the left, and then make the focal distance so that it lines up with the map here. You'll see that that bar is lining up with the map. And if we watch it back, it should look pretty good. What you can do from here is then like change the focal keyframes to then like snap to the meta. So I'm actually going to drag this to the left here because it's focused on our Apple one. Drag my playhead to the right, and we can snap it to the meta one. So go over to focal distance, and then you can see on the left view here, this bar is moving, and we can move it to the picture of meta. And then we can see here that it goes from focusing on the Apple one to the meta. And if you want to change it to the Google afterwards, you can change it to the Google. But I think that's pretty good. It looks pretty good like that. I'm going to add my own little sauce to it. And that's what we added onto our first infographic, is these adjustment layers. Or actually we want to do the one on the second because the noise grain is right. So copy these, hit Command C to copy, and then Command V. And that's going to give us a nice little effect here. I'm actually going to change the grain. I'm going to up it a little bit to, let's do 2, and that'll look pretty good. The intensity of 2. And that's going to look pretty good. Change this back to one view. And that's pretty much it. We have our final animation here. It looks pretty close to what VOX would do. And if you like this tutorial, definitely subscribe. And if you want to learn how to do more of this, like the Ali Abdaal style, even more VOX styles, my style, Iman Ghazi style, Danko style, make sure that you are on the wait list to join our community. We already had a lot of people enter it. We closed it off just to make sure that everybody was being taken care of, and everyone's finding success within the community. So if you want to change yourself from being an average or okay editor to becoming one of the top level editors who is able to work with some pretty serious influencers and brands and also get paid the amount that you deserve, like myself, I made $30,000 a month as a video editor. If you want to be able to do that, that's all in our program and our community. So make sure that you're on the wait list. We're going to open it up on March 1st, and you'll only have 5 days to join, and we're going to keep the spots limited. So make sure you're on that wait list so you can join and not miss out. With that, I'll see you in the next video.